Hi. Venezuela has one of the world's largest oil reserve, but as of today, it has run out of petrol in their petrol stations. The Venezuelan government's lack of cash to import gasoline, combined with US sanctions on them, have led to chronic fuel shortages in Venezuela, which has prevailed over a long-running, productive, unlawful gas trade. But however, Venezuela's oil sector has collapsed. Supporters of Hugo Chavez and Nicolas Maduro said that it is due to economic war on Vietnam, international sanctions, falling oil prices, and because of the business elite. But critics say that it is because of years of mismanagement and corruption. The country has some of Latin America's biggest oil refineries, but they have become so run down over the years as today none of them produce gasoline. Venezuela, home to the world's largest oil proven reserve, is a case study of insecurity of petrostatehood. Since oil was discovered in 1920s, it has taken Venezuela into an exciting but dangerous boom and bust situation, which is also a lesson to be learned for other oil-rich states. Decades of poor governance has led to what was one of Latin America's most prosperous countries into political and economic ruin. Petrostate is an informal term used to describe a country with interrelated attributes. First is that the majority of the government revenue is based on the export of natural gas and oil resources. Secondly, high concentration of economic and political power concentrated on a particular minority. And thirdly, weak and unaccountable economic situation combined with corruption. Countries often described as petrostate include Iran, Ecuador, Chad, Algeria, Cameroon, Indonesia, Iran, Libya, Mexico, Russia, Gulf countries, and Venezuela. Experts say that oil continues to play a commanding fortune in spite of the fact that oil was discovered almost 100 years ago. Oil prices plunged from more than 100 per barrel in 2014 to under 30 per barrel in early 2016, sucking Venezuela into an economic and political convolution. Conditions have worsened since then. There are several upsetting indicators which tells the story. First is the dependence of oil. Nearly 99% of government revenue or sales comes from exports. Second is the falling production. The production of oil has been falling for years as per the graph that you can see now due to inadequate investments and maintenance. Third is the twisting economy. The GDP of Venezuela fell down by nearly 2/3 between 2014 and 19, and experts forecast that with plummeting demand for oil amid the coronavirus pandemic, it would decline further. Then there is the mounting debt. Venezuela's debt is over $150 billion, twice the size of its own economy. Then there is hyperinflation. The inflation has been skyrocketing over the last 10 years by nearly 6,500%. And lastly, because of autocracy. President Nicolas Maduro and his allies have violated basic tenets of democracy to remain in power. Now, these issues, combined with international sanctions and the corona pandemic, have led to a humanitarian crisis in Venezuela, with severe shortages of basic items like food, electricity, water, gasoline, and healthcare systems. According to a recent survey, nearly 96% of Venezuelan population lives below the poverty line. Since 2015, nearly 5 million people have fled Venezuela to nearby countries in the region. But since the pandemic has come, Almost 100,000 people have come back to Venezuela mainly because they have lost their jobs in and around the Latin American countries. Chavez was elected in 1998 on a socialist platform, pledging to use Venezuela's rich oil wealth to reduce poverty and inequalities. Even though he succeeded in his mission, in his costly Bolivarian mission to reduce poverty by nearly 20%, but on the way, he took several steps that triggered a steady but definite decline in the country's oil production, which peaked in the late 1990s and 2000. The general strike of 2002-2003, aimed at asking for Hugo Chavez's resignation, resulted in the stoppage of the oil industry, particularly state oil company Petróleos de Venezuela, which caused significant fuel shortages domestically. His decision to fire thousands of experienced PDVSA workers who had taken part in an industry strike in 2002-2003 gutted the company of important technical expertise. Beginning 2005, Chavez subsidized oil to several countries, including Cuba. Over the years, during his presidency till 2013, the oil reserves reduced drastically and government debt doubled. Chavez expanded the powers of the presidency and edged the country towards authoritarianism. He ended term limits, took control of the Supreme Court, rewrote the constitution, harassed the press, and several companies were nationalized during his tenure, including ExxonMobil and Phillips. The reforms paved way to Nicolas Maduro to establish dictatorship years after Chavez's death. When Nicolas Maduro took over office in 2013 as president, he inherited economic policies reliant on proceeds from oil exports. In the mid of 2014, oil prices tumbled and Venezuela's economy went into free fall. The Maduro government was ill-equipped to respond, and years-long economic crisis has unfolded. Economic mismanagement and US sanctions targeting Venezuela's oil sector also likely contributed to a fall in oil production, such that even as global oil prices rebounded, Venezuela's economy did not recover. Between 2014 and 19, Venezuela's economy contracted by 66%. The government's reliance on the creation of money to finance government deficits, monetization of the deficit, led to hyperinflation, with consumer prices increasing more than 17,000% in 2019, depleting the value of citizens' salaries and savings. Hyperinflation led to a collapse in the value of its currency, the bolivar, and created shortages of foreign currency, particularly US dollars. We can see from this graph how Venezuelan's economy collapsed under Maduro from 2012 onwards till today. As unrest brewed, Maduro consolidated power through political repression, censorship, and electoral manipulation, and in 2018 he got himself re-elected through unfair means, widely condemned as undemocratic. In recent years, Washington has increased sanctions against Venezuela, which has curtailed the income of the Maduro government. Still, Venezuela has kept its oil trading partners, and analysts say that it is because of the support of China, Cuba, Turkey, and Iran that has kept the economy still afloat. The Venezuelan oil industry turned once a poor agricultural nation into a powerful geopolitical country and the region's richest countries. In the mid-1970s, Venezuela nationalized its oil industry and Petróleos de Venezuela was created. The nation's oil wealth allowed for massive investment in infrastructure and also attracted lot of talent from all around the world. State oil company Petróleos de Venezuela refinery network has the capacity to produce 1.3 million barrels per day of fuel. But after years of underinvestment and lack of maintenance, these refineries are only processing 10% of its capacity, according to an internal PDVSA document. The South American country's petroleum production has dropped drastically in recent months due to quarantine steps taken to stop the spread of the coronavirus. Authorities are distributing just 30,000 barrels per day of gasoline to service stations across the country, according to an industry source, compared with pre-lockdown consumption of about 170,000 barrels per day. The country is running out of gasoline. The socialist government has lost the capacity to extract oil from the ground or refine it into a usable form. This is due to the decision taken by Hugo Chavez in 2003 when he terminated all the experienced employees of the state-run oil refineries in an act of petty political retribution. This also brings to the point that it is not only that the country should have natural resources, but it should also have sufficient human resources to extract the benefits from these natural resources. This applies also to other petrostate nations. The gasoline shortage, as we saw, is because of lower production, years of mismanagement and corruption, combined with the US sanctions not allowing them to import gas into Venezuela. Despite a shipment of Iranian crude last year, the shortage has become so severe that people have started stealing oil and refining it at home. In fact, people have also made holes in pipelines which used to carry oil to the storage tanks of the state-run PDVSA. This has also affected other supplies. With lorries, tanks empty, vegetables have been rotting in the farms and farmers are not able to bring their produce to the market, thus further aggravating food shortages. Experts are warning of a looming humanitarian crisis if sanctions are not lifted and the Venezuelan country is not allowed to barter crude with diesel from abroad with companies like Ruspol in Spain, Reliance in India and ENI in Italy. With the refinery sector in disarray, with years of mismanagement, the country is dependent upon imported diesel to fuel electricity and transport essential goods including food, medicine and humanitarian supply. And because of US sanctions that has been implied by Trump administration, no vessel carrying diesel has come to Venezuela since October. They have stock till April, and as such the crisis is looming larger and larger, and this is because of this that experts are warning that immediately the sanction needs to be lifted, otherwise Venezuela will be in deep humanitarian crisis. Venezuela currently relies on Iran for their shipments so as to run their economy, their infrastructure and agricultural operations, and also from shipments from other neighboring countries, and have managed to skirt somehow the US sanctions. The flow of oil in and out of Venezuela have slowed down drastically. As the Trump era is now over, many see this as a fresh start, a fresh opportunity for Venezuela. Representatives of fuel suppliers, importers of Venezuelan fuel and advocacy groups are planning to meet the Biden administration and to press to reverse a ban on crude for diesel swaps. These advocates are not asking the Biden administration for lifting the sanctions or going for renewed diplomacy with Nicolas Maduro government, but what they are asking for is the reversal of crude with diesel swaps, which was considered legal till the last quarter of 2020 when the Trump administration stopped making this exemption, the impact of which on the people of Venezuela was immediate. The humanitarian crisis in Venezuela is a grave one, and many of the advocates for the Venezuelan population see the new administration as a beacon of hope for those currently suffering for fuel shortages. The present sanctions by US on Venezuela is in no way helping US in punishing the Maduro government or overthrowing him from power. But what is happening is, because of this, he is no way affected, neither is cabinet, but who is suffering is the already troubled people of Venezuela. As such, a reinstatement of crude for diesel trade will not affect in any way the US agenda, but will go a long way in helping the Venezuelan people. Hope the information has been useful. Thank you for watching this video.